Chapter 1426. I'm not bad at it, I just don't like it. Lancelot has two auxiliary aliens attached to him, and each of them has outstanding abilities, which makes Zhang-Yi a little jealous. Especially the ability of the Green Knight boss can directly improve Lancelot's combat effectiveness. For a while, Zhang-Yi had no good way to break through Lancelot's defense and could only choose to defend and wait and see. But his defense was to attack instead of defend. Zhang-Yi and Huahua exchanged glances. The tacit understanding between one person and one cat was enough, and no words were needed. Zhang-Yi from the left, Huahua from the right, began to attack Lancelot continuously. Although their attacks were fierce, they could not hurt Boss and Lancelot's bodies, and the bushes would continue to regenerate. You know, even the great general of Nash, Caligulain, was tortured to death by this move. Zhang-Yi would not fall into the same situation. When it comes to defense, he is also very good. After the attack failed, Zhang-Yi chose to give up the attack and let the bushes attack him. The dimensional door opened wide, and soon the dense bushes rushed directly into Zhang-Yi's dimensional door. Space power, pure physical attacks are difficult to work, but defense has its limits. Lancelot silently recited the information he had learned about Zhang-Yi. The next moment, his left hand pressed on the sword in the tree.
Who?
The black flames burned violently along countless vines and rushed towards Zhang-Yi in an instant. Fallen sky ash flame. The flames came to Zhang-Yi in an instant along the vines and entered his space. Zhang-Yi immediately felt that a special force began to erode his space. This kind of flame is unusual. Zhang-Yi's eyes flashed, but he did not choose to cut off the bushes immediately, but continued to let the bushes flow into his space. He has 3,000 of the same space. So, he doesn't mind deliberately sacrificing a space to gain the opportunity to see through the other party's ability characteristics. At the same time, he swung the Holy Judgment in his hand, cut off a large number of vines, and then collected them into the space. First, we need to confirm whether the plant is still active after leaving the main body, and whether it can be replicated like a real tree. Zhang-Yi raised his head. At this time, all around him, he had been wrapped by vines burning with black hellfire. They rushed into Zhang-Yi's dimensional gate, and Zhang-Yi could not even see what was happening outside. However, with his defense, this hellfire wanted to completely break through his 3,000 dimensional gate defenses. At this rate, it would take at least 16 hours to corrode. In the short term, there is no need to worry about the defense being broken, and the superpowers in his body are simply impossible to support his continuous attack for 16 hours. Zhang-Yi felt very confident. As long as his defense was not broken, he would be invincible. God Destroyer. Zhang-Yi directly activated his ability and shattered all the vines in front of him. He and Huahua continued to attack Lancelot from the left and right. They did not get close, even though Huahua, a feline, was strong in close combat and was firing high-energy particle beams from a distance. But facing this level of attack, Lancelot was not affected at all. He only needed to use the sword in the tree to block it all. He knew that Zhang-Yi had not used his full strength. Before they knew the opponent's background, they did not dare to reveal too many cards. The most reliable way to fight is to counter the opponent's moves and make a decisive blow after figuring out the opponent's true ability. Lancelot raised the sword in the tree in his right hand and said lightly, "I have heard of the name of absolute defense. It is said that so far, no one has been able to break your defense, and no one has even hurt you. I am quite interested in this." The sword in the tree in his hand flashed a illusory light and shadow, and the sword of conquest, Conger, transformed by supernatural power, was now integrated with the sword in the tree. There is no fortress in this world that cannot be conquered. Conquerors exist to break down seemingly unbreakable fortresses. Lancelot's strongest means of attack is on this sword. After integrating the sword in the tree, he has reached an astonishing level in both attack and defense. At this moment, he attacked and Zhang-Yi defended. Lancelot rushed towards Zhang-Yi from the bushes like lightning, and the sword in his hand swelled up. The big sword formed by countless vines was like a deformed monster, but it inexplicably brought heavy oppression to people.
The
Raging black flames burned around him, and the 666 mark on his face twisted strangely. Then, it was a simple sword that slashed head-on at Zhang Yi, who was protected by 3,000 dimensional gates.
When
this sword fell, the flames from the depths of hell broke out instantly. Zhang Yi even saw a huge demon head grinning behind Lancelot. Conquer sword. Its attribute is to break defense. When it touched Zhang Yi's dimensional gate, it was silent. But in the depths of the different dimensional space, there was an earth-shattering explosion. With one knife, the 7-dimensional gates were directly chopped to pieces. But under the dark firelight, Zhang Yi also smiled face. If you don't do this, how can you deliver it to me in person? Without close combat, Zhang Yi could not break through the defense of the sword in the tree, and Lancelot could not cut through Zhang Yi's dimensional door. But close combat, then both sides have a chance. Condense the power of the void. Zhang Yi drew his sword. The power of the void had long been condensed in his scabbard, so when the horizontal sword was drawn out, it was like releasing an evil demon. The surging void power surged out crazily, and even the space where Zhang Yi was located was distorted. Good at defense, but not good at attack? That's a thing of the past. He just doesn't like it. But liking and not being able to do it are not the same thing. Lancelot shattered his 7-dimensional doors with a sword, and Zhang Yi also slashed at his body with a knife. The amazing power that broke out in a short distance made Lancelot change his face a little. In the intelligence, isn't this guy only good at defense, and his attack power is lower than the ability index? In a hurry, he could only raise the protective shield in his hand. The long sword hit his shield like a black moon, and the impact caused the entire palace to shake violently. Crack. The shield in Lancelot's hand cracked, and he was thrown out by the huge force. But soon, the vines growing behind him caught his body. Humph. Lancelot groaned. He misjudged Zhang Yi's attack power and suffered serious injuries. But soon, Agugwawen healed his internal injuries and restored him to a perfect fighting posture. Chapter 1427. Master's Fight. In the first head-on collision between Zhang Yi and Lancelot, Zhang Yi had a slight advantage, but this advantage was quickly wiped out by Agugwawen's healing ability. Both of them felt that each other's abilities were difficult to deal with, knowing that they had encountered a difficult guy. In Zhang Yi's right eye, the light was distorted, and the god of destruction was quickly activated, destroying all the huge vines that tried to approach him. To prevent the vines from spreading to his own space and bringing the fallen ash flame to corrode his space, he would not leave Lancelot any chance. After the attack, Lancelot's eyes became much more cautious. Absolute defense is really not just talk. He gives me the feeling of a warrior wearing thousands of layers of armor. Only by using the strongest attack, Sword of Conquest, can we have a chance to break through his defense line, but it only destroyed the 7-layer space door. But it seems that this is not a big deal for him at all. But he also has the opportunity to attack me. The person who attacks first is more likely to reveal his own flaws. So that's it. Zhang Yi was also restless at this time. A slash like the one just now requires the condensation of void power to be used, which means that it is a skill that can be used a limited number of times for him and cannot be used unlimitedly. In a real fight, he is definitely not as good as Lancelot. But fortunately, his 3,000 dimensional gates leave him enough room to maneuver. Relying on my own ability alone, the possibility of winning this guy in front of me is no more than 20%. His 2 auxiliary abilities are too tricky, but the possibility of me losing is less than 5%, and the possibility of him breaking through my defense is also extremely low. The battle between the 2 opponents who are both capable of both offense and defense and have superior combat awareness is undoubtedly a battle whose outcome cannot be predicted by anyone. However, no matter how the 2 sides think in their hearts, the battle will not stop at all. Zhang Yi and Hua are on the left and right sides, constantly attacking Lancelot. Only in this way can they not leave room for the other party to think about countermeasures. Lancelot waved the sword in the tree in his hand, and the huge bushes were constantly destroyed, and then reborn with the help of his power, frantically competing with Zhang Yi and Huahua for space in the palace. If the opponent is only Hundun, I can relax some of my defense and use absolute strength to break his defense first. But there is a tricky cat next to me. Although it does not pose a fatal danger to me, once I focus all my attention on Hundun, it will definitely have a chance to kill me. What a trouble.
Boom.
Huahua sent out a huge high-energy particle beam and shot it at Lancelot. Lancelot was not tired of it. He slashed down with the giant sword in his hand, and the fallen sky ash flames spread wildly. But at the moment when he had the intention to kill Huahua, Zhang Yi in the other direction decisively seized the opportunity, withdrew his long sword, and slashed at him fiercely. A huge black blade light fell from the ceiling like a crescent moon and chopped towards his head. Lancelot had to divide his energy and summon a large number of vines again as a buffer. The layers of huge vines consumed the power of Zhang Yi's sword. But soon, the ground under Huahua made a crisp sound. It stared down and saw that the white floor beneath it was instantly broken. Hundreds of green vines rushed towards its body like poisonous snakes. Barrier stones have the function of resisting the impact of supernatural powers, but the growth of plants can leave scars on the hardest substances. Huahua's hair immediately exploded, and the whole cat turned into a black hedgehog, and every hair stood up like a steel needle. The vines crossed its body and almost cut it, and large pieces of steel needles fell to the ground with a ding-ding-dong-dong. Huahua was angry and roared at Lancelot. Zhang Yi inserted the holy judgment into the scabbard again, and the power of the void began to condense, making a gesture of drawing the sword. Lancelot captured the change in Zhang Yi's attack power through the previous attack. His powerful slashes need to be charged up before they can be launched, and each time they are used, the power will weaken for a period of time. So we just need to seize the gap when he attacks to break his defense. After grasping this point, Lancelot's smile became much more intense. The sword in the tree burst out into a forest, slowing down the double attack of Zhang Yi and Huahua. By the time the power approached Lancelot, a considerable part of the lethality had been eliminated, and the remaining power could not pass through his protective shield at all. Even if he was injured, Agurgaiwan could quickly heal all his non-fatal injuries. Trinity, this is a combination with almost no dead angles. On the contrary, Zhang Yi, because he was confined to the small area of the Holy Spirit Temple and his ability to space shuttle was restricted by the barrier stone, his agility was greatly restricted. As a result, his most proud long-range attack method could not work. Zhang Yi's expression became more and more solemn. At this moment, he already felt that the situation was developing in a direction that was unfavorable to him. At this time, Lancelot had already taken advantage of the cover of the bushes and quickly killed him. Zhang Yi did not hesitate. He pointed his right index finger forward like a pistol. A void sphere condensed between his fingers and quickly turned into a huge void black ball, spiraling forward.
Bang.
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 The sword in the tree expanded rapidly, extending countless vines, instantly blocking Zhang Yi's sight. The violent spatial fluctuations even made it impossible for Zhang Yi to quickly confirm Lancelot's position. Zhang Yi realized Lancelot's purpose. In an area where the space was not particularly large, Lancelot, who was more powerful in close combat, could use the bushes to get close to Zhang Yi. In the first collision, he seemed to have suffered a loss at the hands of Zhang Yi, but at the same time, he also got information about Zhang Yi's close combat. So the second time, he must have come prepared. As Zhang Yi expected, a huge hole suddenly appeared in the bushes to his upper right, and Lancelot's figure appeared from it. His body was burning with terrifying fallen ash flame, and the combination of the Sword of Conquest and the sword in the tree in his right hand exuded a powerful supernatural pressure and slashed towards Zhang Yi fiercely. Zhang Yi's right hand quickly grasped the long sword in the scabbard. His swordsmanship was already quite skilled, but according to Liang Yu, it was better not to choose a head-on fight when facing a real master. But in order to save his life, he always needs to practice some tricks to fight against the enemy at critical moments. He may not be good at using a knife, but he is very skilled in drawing a knife and combining it with the charged attack of Condensed Void. So, facing Lancelot's sudden attack, Zhang Yi suddenly drew out his knife and slashed at him. Chapter 1428. Every second counts. Fallen ash flame against condensed void. The pitch-black color almost swallowed up all the light in the room. The surging power made people feel a shudder from the soul before it even touched them. Manhwa was not idle in the other direction. The moment Lancelot appeared near Zhang Yi, it noticed it.
Meow.
It roared, and its body suddenly expanded. Thick black spikes burst out from its body and all shot behind Lancelot. Facing the joint attack of Zhang Yi and Manhwa, Lancelot showed a crazy smile on his face. He actually held the sword in one hand and summoned a protective shield with the other hand to block the attack from Manhwa. Only one hand collided with Zhang Yi's sword light. When the powerful forces collided, even the palace made of barrier stones began to vibrate violently. The amplitude of the vibration was so large that even the entire huge Holy Spirit Hall reacted. At this moment, in the corridor at the entrance of the palace, Gao Changkong, with Gu Man and Qin Shaozheng, frowned slightly. Why are they fighting? But soon he smiled indifferently. It doesn't matter. There will always be such a day. After saying that, he slowly walked forward, and his long and narrow shadow was dragged into a huge shadow behind him. And right in front of him, the guardian of the Holy Spirit Temple, General Babulu, sat steadily on the chair, as if waiting for his arrival. Lancelot fought Zhang Yi and Manhwa hard. The power of this blow was so strong that he was knocked out, and his arms felt a little numb. But he never had to worry about physical problems. Before Agurgaiwan ran out of energy and died, his body would not have any tiny wounds. His body was hanging upside down on the ceiling, staring at Zhang Yi with his head upside down, with a crazy and ferocious smile on his lips. Are you ready? The show has just begun.
As
soon as the voice fell, he fell straight towards Zhang Yi like a cannonball. Zhang Yi frowned, and the dimension door of all things blocked him. For Lancelot, the fluctuation of space was as clear as a stone thrown into the lake. Of course, he could feel the existence of the dimensional gate, but he was not afraid and chose to plunge directly into the dimensional gate. But there was no joy on Zhang Yi's face, because less than a second later, a dimensional gate exploded directly because it could not withstand Lancelot's power. Lancelot appeared and attacked Zhang Yi again. This guy. Zhang Yi didn't expect that Lancelot could see his attack methods so quickly. In the vacancy period after releasing the Void skill, he will not be able to launch a powerful and effective attack method and can only rely on the dimensional gate for defense.
The
3,000 dimensional gates are the result of Zhang Yi splitting his space in order to differentiate the risks. Doing so avoids the risk of being completely exposed to the enemy due to the collapse of the dimensional gate. However, the price of doing so is that the tolerance threshold of each space will be reduced, and it will be broken by the enemy one by one. When facing an enemy with a strong enough attack power, there will be trouble at the moment. Lancelot was like a demon from hell, his body burning with terrifying black flames, grinning and raising his sword to slash at Zhang Yi's dimensional gate. 1, 2, 3. He burst out with absolute power, and in a short moment, he could launch tens of thousands of crazy attacks. It won't take long to destroy a dimensional gate. Of course, Zhang Yi would not let him do this. After the 13 dimensional gates were destroyed, his power vacancy was also restored. Looking at Lancelot, who wanted to madly slash all the dimensional gates and pull him out from under the unbreakable alien door, the light in Zhang Yi's eyes began to distort. It's less than 30 meters away from me. Do you know that the god destruction at this distance is impossible to avoid? The strongest attack at short and medium distances, the full range coverage strike skill, god destruction, was launched instantly. In a sense, this move is even more powerful than the various attack methods after condensing the void, except for some distance restrictions. Lancelot's crazy attack stopped in an instant because his sixth sense made him feel the crisis. Shield. He raised the shield in his left hand. A small cross-knight shield actually burst out with a strange black light. The torn cross mark became more and more obvious, as if it was a blasphemy against God. Black light emerged from the shield and turned into a hemispherical energy, blocking Lancelot. The power of God's destruction can only be resisted at this distance, and there is no way to avoid it. The frontal impact made the light of his shield dim, and the whole person flew backwards.
Boom.
This time, Lancelot broke countless vines and was finally hit against the wall. But as the saying goes, as long as a Gugwawen is not dead, his injuries are nothing. Unlike Zhou Kur, a Gugwawen is not a doctor. She is more like a provider, using her own supernatural powers and even her life to supplement another person. After Lancelot's injuries were healed, a crazy grin appeared on his face, and he swept over like a hurricane again. Your attack needs at least 5 seconds to recover. This is probably the shortcoming of defensive aliens. But my attack does not need a break. Zhang Yi said coldly. What are you pretending? Without that vegetable man to enhance your defensive attributes, you would have been beaten into a pig's head. Lancelot's giant sword chopped down head-on. As a warrior, don't make excuses for your failure. Winning is everything. This time, he shattered Zhang Yi's 16-dimensional gates again. Even if Zhang Yi and Huahua tried their best to fight, it was obvious that they had no advantage at all in this situation. They were even at a disadvantage. At this rate, I can only hold on for 10 more minutes at most, and then I will have to flee. Zhang Yi said to himself. If all 3,000-dimensional gates were broken, Zhang Yi's ability would be greatly affected. It would take at least 1 day to restore the use of the alien space. At that time, he might not even be able to defeat the weakest Epsilon, and it would be dangerous at this time and place. But fortunately, I have helpers around me. Zhang Yi took a deep breath. After a while, he finally got the result he wanted. The vines of the sword in the tree that he cut off and put into a different space died quickly and did not continue to grow. This also means that boss cannot invade Zhang Yi's space through the vines extending from the sword in the tree. Zhang Yi transferred a section of the vine to the shadow and said to Zhou Kur, now, analyze what this thing is. Is it human tissue or plant tissue? Chapter 1429 Your sword is my sword. There are many people in Jingwei's shadow space. Although they cannot appear on the scene to cooperate with Zhang Yi and Huahua in the battle, they are all waiting for the opportunity to play a role. Zhou Kur took out her equipment at the first time to study the organizational structure of the sword in the tree. With the help of Lu Kuran, she quickly analyzed and obtained the results. The human cell structure has completely disappeared, and only less than 5% of the characteristics of animal cells are retained. Even cell walls and chloroplasts have been born, almost completely transformed into plants. Zhang Yi watched Lancelot attacking his dimensional gate while thinking about the means to deal with the enemy. But his eyes fell on the sword in the tree in Lancelot's right hand. Zhang Yi couldn't find the weakness of Lancelot's body for a while. Lancelot's ability is very comprehensive, both offensive and defensive. Then he can only start with his 2 auxiliary aliens. The Green Knight boss, who has completely turned into a sword in the tree, has a tree extending from his body. Obviously, he has no pain nerves, otherwise he would not allow Zhang Yi and Huahua to destroy it like this. At this time, he probably only retained part of his self-awareness, and most of his body was transformed into plants. In other words, unless Zhang Yi could smash the main body in Lancelot's hand, he could not kill boss. Maybe there is a way to try. Zhang Yi and Huahua continued to fight with Lancelot while looking for their flaws. After confirming boss's information, a bold idea emerged in Zhang Yi's mind. He took a deep breath and said directly to Huahua, Huahua, join forces with me and use the strongest force to attack the guy in front of us. Lancelot could also hear this conversation, which means that Zhang Yi did not intend to hide it from him at all. Lancelot raised his eyebrows. Even if this man and cat used the strongest means, they could not break his defense. But since the other party did this, it would definitely not be meaningless, and there must be a backhand. Lancelot retreated far away in an instant, and the emerald green tree sword in his hand quickly expanded, and a large number of branches several meters thick stretched between him, Zhang Yi and Huahua. Zhang Yi knew that he would defend, but that was not important. He drew out the holy judgment from the scabbard, and the power of the void slashed wildly in the direction of Lancelot, like a torrent. Huahua also opened his bloody mouth and increased the power of his breath to the maximum. The joint attack of the two Ypsilons hit the layers of tree trunks fiercely. Even Lancelot had to use all his energy to block such a blow. At this moment, a beautiful girl in black combat uniform slowly emerged from the shadow behind Zhang Yi. Yang Xinxin stood beside Zhang Yi. She gently raised her right hand, and the six-winged angel of desire immediately pulled the longbow in her hand. A red feather turned into an arrow and shot forward. "Be loyal to me, and don't hurt me and my brother." The second arrow was black, the arrow of hatred. "Hate, despise, betray, and hurt your master at this moment." Yang Xinxin's sudden appearance gave Lancelot a bad premonition. But he didn't know Zhang Yi's ability thoroughly, and as for Mu Yan and Yang Xinxin and others, he didn't have any information. The trees grew wildly, blocking the arrows. Although he didn't know how powerful it was, Lancelot was confident in the double defense of the sword in the tree and his own protective shield. However, the arrow just floated into the green tree trunk. Zhang Yi stared at Lancelot's right hand with some expectation. The huge and bulky body is the best target in front of Xinxin's ability. I just don't know if the extended branches will be affected by the arrows. Zhang Yi's self-talk has not yet ended. A moment after the tree was hit by the arrow, there was a sudden movement. The bushes that almost covered the entire palace began to retract with a boom. Lancelot's eyes flashed with shock. He looked at Bose, who was connected to his right hand. "Bose, what's wrong with you?" Once the connection is established, the sword in the tree will be controlled by the user's mind and can be freely manipulated. But he suddenly felt that the connection between him and Bose was broken. There are only two possibilities: either Bose died or Bose took the initiative to regain control of his body. The next moment, the sword in the tree on Lancelot's arm suddenly rose up, and a towering tree grew wildly from Lancelot's arm upwards, and countless wooden thorns stabbed at Lance's body. Lancelot didn't expect to be attacked by Boss, and his body was hit hard by the wooden thorns for a while. If it weren't for the critical moment, the protective shield played a role. He would be directly pierced by these wooden thorns. But even so, the vines grew wildly, trying to entangle Lancelot's body and then strangle him. "Boss, what are you doing?" Lancelot tore off Boss from his arm and threw him far away. He soon realized that Boss's abnormality was related to the sudden appearance of Yang Xinxin. He stared at Yang Xinxin fiercely, a person with the ability to bewitch people's hearts. Yang Xinxin's mouth curled up a weird smile. "You are not the only one who brought helpers." Lancelot was a little irritable. Without the sword in the tree, his combat effectiveness would also be affected. But even so, he still had Agirgaiwan, and he could still fight with 1 against 2. However, the scene that happened next made his heart sink directly. Because he saw Boss slowly crawling towards Zhang Yi, and then attached to Zhang Yi's arm. The ability of the rule system is absolute. After being shot by Yang Xinxin's arrow, everyone will become her slave and obey her orders. Therefore, Yang Xinxin ordered Boss to help Zhang Yi attack Lancelot. Boss made the best choice, which was to become the sword in Zhang Yi's hand. Zhang Yi did not refuse. He had seen Boss's ability. This kind of plant-based ability that can be infinitely regenerated as long as energy is provided is extremely difficult to deal with, and it has both offensive and defensive capabilities. The vines tightly wrapped around Zhang Yi's body and began to absorb the supernatural power in Zhang Yi's body. At the same time, Zhang Yi had a wonderful feeling in his mind, as if he had grown an extra arm, or that he could grow many more fingers on his palm. He can control the sword in the tree at will. This feels great. Zhang Yi took out the energy food from the space and stuffed it into his mouth. The next moment, he looked at Lancelot, who was looking gloomy. The vines in his right hand grew rapidly and turned into a huge green sword. "Now, your sword is mine." Zhang Yi raised his right hand, and the sword in the tree pointed at Lancelot. Countless spiked vines stabbed at him violently. Chapter 14:30 Brothers and Dear Friends. The sword in the tree fell into Zhang Yi's hands and turned into a sharp blade pointing at Lancelot. The weapon that could instantly transform into a large forest, with both offensive and defensive capabilities. Instantly, like a rain of pear blossom needles, thousands of sharp-tipped vines stabbed at Lancelot. Lancelot gritted his teeth, his face gloomy and almost dripping with water. He knew the power of the sword in the tree, so he quickly dodged the dense attacks. But in a flash, the attacks continued to come. Fallen ash flame. The sword of conquest burned with a blazing flame, sweeping all around, burning a large number of vines to ashes. But this kind of damage could not hurt the root of the sword in the tree at all. As long as the main body exists, it can regenerate infinitely. So immediately afterwards, more vines attacked him. The thorns thrust, the vines entangled, and the lush trees occupied almost all the space in front of him. When this sword that once belonged to him fell into the hands of others, Lancelot felt how difficult it was to deal with it. Zhang Yi and Hua Hua were not idle. They attacked him at the same time and launched a fierce attack. In just a few seconds, Lancelot was attacked tens of thousands of times. He had to increase his strength to the maximum. The Hell Knight who fell into the netherworld, dye the flag of the rebellious heaven red with my blood. When the angel's feathers are broken and fall to the dust, I will sing the hymn of the end of the world with a torn throat. Lancelot chanted the Knight's Hell Song, which greatly enhanced his strength to resist the joint attack of Zhang Yi and Hua Hua. However, there was no way to destroy the sword in the tree. Now it was even difficult to get close to Zhang Yi's body. Zhang Yi, who got the sword in the tree, was at ease. He excitedly controlled the sword in the tree to attack him. This kind of plant weapon that can be controlled only by thought is simply too perfect. Lancelot, admit defeat. I can keep your life, but you must apologize to me and hand over the notebook. Zhang Yi said. Although he has the absolute upper hand now, he must pay a huge price to kill Lancelot. Now is not the time to risk his life with him. Lancelot heard this and clenched his teeth angrily. He waved the huge sword burning with black flames in his hand, swept across the sky, and all the vines within hundreds of meters in front of him turned into ashes. He also realized that he had no chance of winning if he continued to fight. Without the sword in the tree, he could not win against Zhang Yi and Hua Hua in a one-on-two situation. I can give you the notes, but you have to give boss back to me, Lancelot said. Zhang Yi heard this and raised a smile at the corner of his mouth. He looked at the sword in the tree in his hand. This weapon was surprisingly useful, and he was reluctant to give it back to Lancelot. There is no reason to give back something you have already got. However, boss is not a simple weapon after all. He is a member of the Knights of the Round Table and a living person. So Zhang Yi said, I can give it back to you, but I have to wait until I leave Nash country. Lancelot's eyes darkened. He is my brother, my beloved friend. If you dare to attack him, the Knights of the Round Table will fight you to the death. Zhang Yi curled his lips. It was so scary. He was really scared. But he could also feel that boss meant a lot to Lancelot. It was hard to find such a person who could transform into a powerful weapon. Don't worry. The time to control him is limited, and your brother will not surrender to me obediently. But now I want to keep him as a hostage, do you understand? Zhang Yi's eyes were a little impatient. If you don't agree, then we will fight to the death here. I'm just notifying you. Do you really think I'm discussing it with you? This sentence made Lancelot's face look so ugly. If they continue to fight, he will definitely be the one who suffers, and he may even die in Zhang Yi's hands. Lancelot gritted his teeth, stared at him, and said, Well, let's stop fighting for now. But remember, you are not allowed to have any idea of boss. Yang Xinshin's ability to control people has a limit on the time. When the control time is over, boss will naturally regain his sanity. However, during this period of time, there is still a lot of room for operation. Zhang Yi sneered in his heart. I know,
Zhang Yi said lightly.
He controlled the sword in the tree with his mind and took back all the vines, but the sword in the tree was still wrapped around his arm and could be used at any time. Lancelot's heart was bleeding. I'll get you the notes, he said angrily, and left the palace. Zhang Yi was not afraid that he would escape. Anyway, boss was in his hand, and Lancelot didn't dare to play tricks. He discussed with young Xinxin. Xinxin, I like this sword very much. What should I do? The properties of the sword in the tree are too good. Zhang Yi can't let it go, but he is a living person. It is difficult to recruit such a guy, and even if he is recruited, Zhang Yi will not be particularly relieved. If he had turned against them during the battle, he might have been stabbed to pieces like Lancelot.
Yang.
Xinxin lowered her eyes. This is easy. Just turn him into a tool, without his own will. Keep his life, erase his personal will, and turn him into an empty shell. I mean, it's not difficult to turn him into a brain-dead vegetable. Yang Xinxin said something very scary lightly. Can this be done? Zhang Yi asked curiously. Zhou Kuder gave Zhang Yi the answer. It can be done with drugs. Zhang Yi nodded. Very good, very good. Lancelot really handed over the notes of the master obediently. After the members of the Knights of the Round Table learned that boss was captured, they looked at Zhang Yi and his men with more resentment. But they had to admit that Zhang Yi's team was strong enough that even they were not sure they could defeat him. Especially the space that Zhang Yi carried with him. No one knew how many aliens with special abilities Zhang Yi brought with him. Don't forget what you said. After leaving here, you must return boss. Lancelot stared at Zhang Yi and said. Zhang Yi spread his hands. Don't worry, but you have to prepare a large ransom. Next we should go find Gao Chongkong. His eyes passed through the layers of palaces and looked into the distance. If I'm not mistaken, that guy has already anticipated everything that will happen at this time. He is one step ahead of us. Gao Chongkong's ability, reincarnation deduction, can accurately predict what will happen in the future. Although Gao Chongkong's ability will deviate from Zhang Yi's time ability, it will basically not go wrong in the general direction. Using this ability, he can deduce countless times in his mind to find the road leading to the gate of the Holy Spirit Temple.